Welcome to Pullback, the podcast that digs into the ethics of everyday choices. I'm Kyla Hewson, and I'm here with Kristen Pugh.
What?
And we're actually here. I can see her. She's in the room with me again. What a treat.
Different room, same people.
And today, we're talking cultural appropriation. To help us unpack this topic, we are joined by three guests. First, we have Panthea Vatandoost, television, film, and theater actor, and founder and managing artistic director of Medusa Theater Society. Panthea's pronouns are she, her. Hello, Panthea.
Hello.
We are also joined by two members of the Daily Dose of Blackness podcast, a show designed to center and celebrate Black youth experiences and struggles. We are pleased to welcome Biraima and Saliema, whose pronouns are he, him, and she, her. Hello.
Hey there. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for joining us. This has been like a little bit of a work in progress, and I really appreciate that you guys got back to me so quickly and have been so flexible with finding a time for all of us to record together.
Yeah, so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. This is a topic that we've been wanting to cover for a while, as it plays a big role in consumer ethics, which is what our show is normally about. But it was such a big and nuanced subject that we were a little intimidated. So really, thank you for coming along to discuss this with us. We really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was nervous to take the lead on this episode. Kristen's usually the the research person, but she was like, no, Kyla, you can do this one. So in the spirit of stress, I calmed myself by way over preparing. I listened to over 25 episodes of other podcasts talking cultural appropriation and have already shared the best ones on Twitter, although anyone listening who wants to find those again, you can head to our research notes and I'll link them there as well. I've made notes on discussion points from the book White Negroes When Cornrows Were in Vogue and Other Thoughts on Cultural Appropriation by Lauren Michelle Jackson. But I encourage interruptions, and if we don't make it to every discussion point, or even most of them, or even any of them, that's more than welcome. I wanted to make sure we all had something to chew on. If I learned anything by binge studying this topic, it's that cultural appropriation, like culture itself, is nuanced and sometimes hard to pin down. So this is a safe space. You are welcome to share your thoughts with the understanding that there are a ton of us here, and everyone has had different life experiences which may result in different views on the same subject. So, that said, I would like to kick things off by reading two abbreviated but still long pages from Jackson's book. I was going to shorten it by paraphrasing, but honestly, every word is so good, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole thing. And then once we're done that, I will open the floor to my wonderful guests. Appropriation is everywhere and is also inevitable. Appropriation, for better and worse, cannot stop. So long as peoples interact with other peoples by choice or by force, cultures will intersect and mingle and graft onto each other. We call hip-hop a black thing, and it is indeed a black thing, that also emerged in neighborhoods where black and brown people, homegrown and from the South, from the islands, melded together to produce the music of their experiences in shared poverty and community. Early rap was itself an appropriation of another generation's sound. Funk, soul, disco, repurposed for something different and new. Rap also revolutionized the lively form of appropriation known as sampling, a means of incorporating the past, the recent past, and other genres to make timeless music. The idea that any artistic or cultural practice is closed off to outsiders at any point in time is ridiculous, especially in the age of the internet. Most everyday acts of appropriation, done unconsciously, escape our notice. The word that works itself into your speech because your best friend sprinkles every other phrase with it, and where they got it from they don't even know. A new style you have grown into without thought, without a specific icon in mind, by just going with the flow of fashion. The yoga pose you sink into after a workout. The way you shimmy when your favorite song comes on. If appropriation is everywhere, and everyone appropriates all the time, why does any of this matter? The answer, in a word, power. When the oppressed appropriate from the powerful, it can be very special indeed. And yet, when the powerful appropriate from the oppressed, society's imbalances are exacerbated and inequalities prolonged. In the history of problematic appropriation in America, we could start with the land and crops and cuisine commandeered from native peoples, along with the mass appropriation of the labor of the enslaved. The tradition lives on. The things Black people make with their hands and minds, for pay and for the hell of it, are exploited by companies and individuals who offer next to nothing in return. White people are not penalized for flaunting Black culture. They are rewarded for doing so, financially, artistically, socially, and intellectually. For a white person, seeing, citing, and compensating Black people, however, has no such reward and may actually prove risky. According to a 2018 report by the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity at Duke University, Black households hold less than 7 cents on the dollar compared to white households. The research also found Black households with a college-educated breadwinner hold less wealth than white families whose breadwinners do not have a high school diploma. White households with unemployed breadwinners have a higher net worth than Black households whose breadwinners work full-time. Controlled for income, Black families save at a higher rate than their white counterparts and spend less than whites. So that's the end of the quote, and obviously this is a book that's centered on the American experience, but I don't think that it's too far off of what we might see in other Western, especially Western countries. And it's focused on the Black experience, but I don't think it's too far off of what we might see happening to other cultures. So I was going to just kind of go around one by one and ask each of you to introduce yourselves, maybe tell us something interesting or fun about you, and then let us have your opening thoughts to start us off. Panthea, would you mind going first?
Sure. My name is Panthea Vatandoost. I'm in the performing arts. I am Iranian, born and raised. I immigrated here as a teenager. And all of a sudden, I can't find a single interesting thing about myself.
Well, we heard in warm-up that you're a big cat stan, so...
I am. I'm a huge cat stan. If your cat hates all human beings, that cat will love me. I am the cat whisperer.
Well, we were also talking pre-show that I know that your name autocorrects to Panther, and that's just the name you go by on some social media sites, so...
Yeah, I actually have a somewhat funny story about that. A couple of years ago, at this restaurant job that I had, my nickname was Panther for that exact same reason, because every time people would try to text me, it would autocorrect to Panther. And one time someone asked me if my parents had named me Panthea because it's so close to Panther. And it caught me so off guard, because I'm Iranian and I was born in a different country that doesn't speak English. And so the pronunciation won't even be the same. And I just thought that was the funniest thing in the world.
You're like, no, my parents did not do this on purpose.
Yes, they researched in case one day we immigrate to an Anglo country. Yeah.
Oh, what a question.
Any opening thoughts on the subject matter or the quote I just read?
Yeah, I've actually, interestingly enough, because of some recent experiences, I mean, I'm quite active in the film community as a beginner activist, I guess. And something that I've come across a lot, especially over the last year and a half, is this massive grouping of any and all non-white people. And so when Kyla approached me to participate in this episode of the podcast, ever since then, I've had this kind of disclaimer running in my head, and I actually really want to say it. And the disclaimer is that basically any and all things that I share on this podcast, on this episode, is strictly my views, and they don't even represent the views of all Iranian people or even all Iranian women. And I don't know why this concept has come into effect that all non-white people have the exact same views, opinions, preferences, political leanings, etc. But these are just like, I don't even represent my entire community. It's just me.
Oh, but Panthea, I asked you here because I thought you did represent the entire Iranian community. So
all of Middle East, North Africa, that's
the
me.
whole region.
No. Yeah, 100%. So yeah, that's the disclaimer that I kind of wanted to bring up. But I also really appreciated this reading because another thing that pops into my head is that I, as an Iranian person, I'm really light skinned. Even as an Iranian, I have some, I don't know, whatever my lineage. And so the way I'm affected by any sort of race-based assumptions is very different than a dark-skinned Black person would. And so I really appreciated this reading right off the top because it brings to focus one of the groups that is so devastatingly affected by race-based assumptions, by cultural appropriation, by systemic racism.
Wonderful. Thank you, Panthea. Saliema, did you want to introduce yourself, tell us something interesting, and then let us know your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Saliema. I was born in Canada, but my family's from Sudan. My family moved here in 2001. For this topic, as a group, Daily Dose of Blackness has talked about our cultural appropriation a lot, and we talked about seeing cultural appropriation in our school and like handling it. And I think there's times where people appropriate culture without even knowing it. So I think it's important to have this discussion and talking about what is cultural appropriation and like how to stay away from it.
Biraima, do you want to introduce yourself and give us your initial thoughts here? And a fun fact.
Yeah, definitely a fun fact. Well, hi everyone. My name is Biraima. I am currently in my last year of high school, and I am a part of the Daily Dose of Blackness group, more specifically working on our podcast side of things. I love cats. I'm an avid cat lover, cat activist for everything about cats. So I do have my own cat. She is my best friend. And I'll also kind of introduce Daily Dose of Blackness and stuff. What our host said earlier about Daily Dose of Blackness, we do also do podcasts, but we also do have a YouTube channel. We have a website. We do have a website, which we obviously link all our content to, and we also have articles on there. The articles, we mostly talk about things that are just important to us. Current events, things that are happening in our community or others' communities that we want to shed light on or make the public more aware of. So definitely that's what we use our website for. We started around 2.5 years ago, and since then it was just a thought in the back of our heads to do this, but now it's become a reality. So it's amazing to see, to be honest. And a fun fact about me is that I love reading. Reading is probably one of my most favorite things to do, and promoting reading on others, like promoting reading on youth. That's my favorite thing. I love doing that because it's just a way to kind of escape and just like enjoy yourself for the time moment, which is really relaxing and nice to see.
Nice. Do you have a book that you're reading right now?
I'm currently reading right now The Sun Is Also a Star by one of my favorite authors, Nicola Yoon. She wrote Everything and Everything. And that's one of my favorite romance novels ever. And I will say the book is better than the movie. Just have to say that.
Nice. And any opening thoughts on the reading or on the subject in general?
Definitely, the reading really opened my eyes while you were reading it. I was just thinking about so many things, and like definitely what Saliema said about how we talked about like cultural appropriation versus appreciation, and like it is very hard to see sometimes. Like sometimes it can be so minuscule that we pass over it and don't even realize it's happening. But then when we finally take like a outer view on it, we're like, wow, like we can't believe this just happened before us, and how did we not prevent it or stop this or even just slow it down at fact so it's not happening at like alarming rates and stuff. So I really was thinking about that the whole time, and it just kept me pulling me back to think about this one incident where a dollar store was selling indigenous costumes for like Halloween season. And like again, when you said in the beginning that you guys are talking about consumerism about a lot in your podcast, it was making me thinking, wow, I've consumed from that store before or that company. And it's like, wow, I'm really like, at the same time, it's something really small, but not really small. And it's like, wow, I don't support this company with my values and ideologies, but I'm supporting them. So it's like, yeah, always taking a bigger picture on things. So yeah, those are my opening thoughts.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and that's why we wanted to cover this, but we obviously we were like, oh, it's so big. How? So actually, to talk about the kind of the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, I thought that was something that was really interesting to look at. And I know you guys have done episode discussions on this before, so I was wondering if Saliema or Biraima, if either of you wanted to explain the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation.
I think I'll answer that. Definitely with a cultural appropriation and appreciation, definitions will vary, I say, down to different people and stuff. But for me, the main differentiator is that when it's appreciation, there's genuine research behind it. And I mean, like, by genuine research, I mean, like, this person took the time and took their effort to learn about this in a genuine way, not because it's like, okay, I don't want to be asked if I'm appropriating or appreciating. And then when they tell me I'm appropriating, I'm going to get mad and stuff, you know?
It's kind of hard to differentiate between the two because anyone could do anything and just be like, oh no, I'm appreciating it and like stuff like that. So it's hard to like come up with a definition. I think like personally, I wouldn't wear or do something that's like another person's culture because it's not my culture. I feel that's just like a general thing that everyone should do, you know? But I think it just varies on the situation, like as Biraima said.
It definitely varies on the situation.
I think context really matters in this situation. I think if you're in a position where someone is questioning what you've done or what you've worn or what you've said as cultural appropriation, that's already a red flag. It means that something along the way went wrong enough for what you're doing to stick out so much that someone is concerned about it. That's kind of my perspective on that.
So I lifted a few discussion topics from the book that I read. And in chapter 1 of Jackson's book, it's called The Pop Star. She discusses the use of Black music and dance in the teen pop star who is aiming to be seen as more mature by the music industry. She specifically calls out Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, and Miley Cyrus, who all used Black music and dance to distance themselves from the Disney pop machine. This works because Black girls and young women are often read as older and more mature than their white counterparts. So this gets used in music a lot, and I was just wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that.
There's just like a well of problems in that example you just gave.
Sorry. I mean, I wanted everyone to have something to work with.
Since you mentioned Miley Cyrus, I was thinking back about like her phase of like whatever that was. A lot of people were saying that like, do you know how she was like acting like different? Like it was like a way of her going away from her Disney side, and like it's really hard to explain, but like it's basically like they would use Black culture to like be a rebel, basically. Yeah, that's like the first thing I thought of when you said that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we all picture Miley Cyrus twerking at the music awards that she...
And like even like with twerking would never have like a negative or wasn't really like that sexual until like Miley Cyrus did it, and everyone was like shocked because it was like a white girl doing it, and like it became like seen really, really negative.
It became stigmatized.
Yeah.
Man, I'm still trying to pull apart like the sexism and stuff that's coming out, and then the racism layered on top of it. Oh, Hollywood's so broken.
There is so much in there, because what does it say about, I don't know, like North American society's view on Black culture if a white girl using the music or dance means that she's too dangerous and like too sexual or too inappropriate? Like there is so much negative connotation attached to it for it to actually work in the way that it did, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's just so sad.
I know. That one's a bit of a bummer. Let's head over to chapter 2, The Cover Girl, where Jackson writes extensively on how fashion is strongly influenced by Black culture, but almost never attributed to it. A quote from the book reads, An August 2017 article in British GQ credited Harry Styles with bringing thick, ostentatious men's rings into fashion, like men of color on the street haven't decorated their hands that way for decades. She points to the famous monologue from Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada, where Miranda Priestley takes Anne Hathaway's character down a peg by pointing out she exists in this world of fashion where, whether she likes it or not, all of the choices come from the top. But what the movie leaves out is all the theft those at the top do to those at the bottom in order to come up with those fashions in the first place. And I'm realizing Saliema and Biraima might be so young that you've never seen The Devil Wears Prada. I'm sorry.
No.
I don't know what that is.
No.
This is amazing. I have to say, I am so happy to be in this room with you two. This is wonderful.
But I hope the idea got through. And I was wondering if anyone had any thoughts on that.
The first thing that came to mind when you were reading that was the article of Harry Styles in British GQ, because it just brought up in my mind how this past 2 years, you could say, like, kind of like a fashion renaissance in, like, the terms of toxic masculinity and the way men should be dressing and things, really, like, it really took off this year. And you could kind of say from, like, a pop culture stance that Harry Styles really initiated this. And, like, it's honest to see, because in terms, he was, like, being praised for wearing a dress and, like, breaking those norms. But just, it reminded me back of a while back, I want to say 2013 to 2014, Young Thug, for his album cover, was wearing a dress. And, like, it just turned into this big thing of people bashing him about, oh, this is too feminine. This is, like, it's not acceptable. And definitely for him being a black man and stuff, like, homosexuality and the black community and just everything to do with the queer community is so, it's an ongoing issue. This was really sad to see, sad to see, like, not even from the black community, but just overall the internet community. And you can say people were just bashing him for doing this. And, like, fast forward now, a couple years later, you can't say that, oh, progression in these few years have changed, but can you really say that? And it's like, in terms, it's because a black man did something, but now a white man is making it popular. So, yeah.
There's so many fashion icons and artists that are also fashion icons that are black men, and they've done everything that Harry Styles has done and even more, but they don't have like the same feedback from it, like the same recognition. And even like A$AP Rocky, he was like one of the first men to like cover for one of this magazine. I forgot what it was, and not just like a black man. He was just like the first man in general, and that was like a big thing. But a lot of people don't know about it.
As you were doing the reading, the thing that popped into my head is I think it was about a week ago, Billy Porter actually slammed the Vogue, the American Vogue magazine, for having Harry Styles be the first man to be on the cover alone. And he's wearing a dress, and in the spread, like in the photos in the inside of the magazine, allegedly he's also wearing like a series of dresses. And Billy Porter has like slammed it, saying that him as a black gay man wearing gender fluid clothing for many years now, he has never been offered. And so the type of opportunities afforded to Harry Styles and someone like Billy Porter are completely different. But even as I'm saying it out loud, then there's a question of, yes, Harry Styles is arguably a global phenomenon, whereas Billy Porter is not.
That's where the power imbalance comes in, though, isn't it?
Exactly. The fact that as soon as Harry Styles started wearing more gender fluid clothing, all of a sudden his status went up even more.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when a non-white person does it, suddenly they're not marketable and they're confusing and they're pushing their agenda on the general public, etc., add in whatever negative review you can think of.
Wasn't there was
Lil Nas?
this Yes. I was like, who was Fox News mad at this summer? I can't remember.
That was so funny because when you were just saying that, Panthea, I was literally just thinking of him. I was like, wow. So great minds think alike.
All right. Any final thoughts on this subject?
I guess so we brought it up. So funny how we were both thinking of Lil Nas X, and like in my mind, I was just thinking about, okay, Panthea just said all these great points, but it's like now there's someone actually like defying these points. Like, wow, Lil Nas X is like kind of, you could say now, an icon for breaking these toxic masculinity molds and just like living his true life as a queer Black man. So it's like, wow, someone's really doing it. But at the same time, in my head, I'm like, but why? What shifted? Like, what's changed? Like thinking back, is it because maybe the world knows it's finally time to give Black creators their credit? But is it just like a one-time thing? Like, I don't know. It's just in the back of my mind. It's amazing that he's being able to do this, but just what took them so long is kind of my question.
Yeah.
He also already had to put up with that bullshit about like whether his songs counted as country songs or not.
Oh,
so
yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh, I forgot about that. But yeah, I guess, I don't know. When it comes to that, what upsets me the most is just how shocking it is to see because nobody else is able to do it. So it's just like, oh, look at him breaking the mold. And it's like, well, there's lots of people over the years who would have broken the mold if only they'd been allowed.
yeah, totally.
And it's just funny to me, like my last point, it's just like funny how it's a shocker why he's doing it now and stuff. And definitely like, by mean shocker, like to the Black community, how like someone's doing this. But like, if you think about it, Blackness is inherently queer. Like there have always been, there will always be. And there are Black queer people, and like trying to like detach the Black queer experience from the Black experience is valid. And like, I do understand that, but like, we need to use this and unify the term Blackness by not taking any other piece of identity and just putting it in its own box when we just generally are fighting the same battle. So yeah, that's my thing on that.
Mm-hmm.
In chapter 5, The Meme, Jackson she writes about digital blackface, the practice where racists and misogynists use generic photos to present as who they are not, often women of color, to create disagreement among activists. The goal is to make causes look flimsy or extreme to quote-unquote allies on the border of movements who are inclined to believe hoaxes that they wish were true. If a cause is written off as ridiculous, then they don't have to do the hard work of supporting it or advocating for change. So, as youths, said like an old man in a stoop-side rocking chair, is this something that you guys would like to speak to? I presume that everyone plugs straight into the internet via IV, while Kristen and I still access it via our dusty AOL dial-up. Yeah, have you noticed, is this like an issue that's been on your radar? Is people presenting online as who they are not?
Definitely. I feel like when you're talking about that, I feel like the term, like when I'm talking about it to my friends, or what I call it is blackfishing. So definitely something I've been keeping my eye on, and like have seen recently. I feel like around 3 years ago, that's when like it really took off, when a lady from Amsterdam was supposed to be signed to this huge modeling agency, but like pictures of her like recently got out that she's a white woman and she fully on looked Black. Like it was her trying to embrace a persona as a Black woman and live like a Black woman, and like kind of show the public like, oh, she's following all these Black cultures and stuff like that, and like including like deepening her skin to look like, to make it as authentic as possible.
Yeah, and like it's always been a thing where Black people get bashed for using like skin lightening products and bleaching their skin, which is like a terrible thing, but skin tanning isn't, and like people are just saying like the double standards of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as though people want the style of like cultures that are not their own. Latin culture or Black culture, but they don't want any of the responsibility that comes with that. So it's really easy to present as this stylish person online, but then you step out the door and you don't have all the same problems. I don't know. Any thoughts, Panthea?
There's kind of a lot swirling around in my head about that. I guess in a really dark way, it's really fascinating to me how there are so many people in the white communities in North America specifically, but I suppose in Europe as well, who for some reason don't find their own culture, I don't know, interesting enough or whatever it is. It's like this person will put on the skin and the look, and there are even like now there are chapsticks that you can put on that like they have an ingredient in it that will make your lips swell up and be more plump. It's like you will do all these things to make your eyebrows look thicker, make your hair look thicker, longer, or curlier, or whatever, have more curves, be darker skinned, speak in a specific intonation, listen to specific music, dance in a specific way. It's all okay when it's you doing it, but when it's that person from that culture themselves, they're not acceptable and they're too much and they're unwelcome. Like the disconnect is that you will go so far as to literally put on this human suit of another culture, but that person who already exists in it is not welcome or accepted. That disconnect is kind of where all of my thought goes of you don't see it's almost as if they don't see the value in the human being. They just see the value in the aesthetics. And so they extract what they perceive as the valuable part and leave the rest behind, and then like repurpose it and resell it back to that same culture. Like look at what's happened to the yoga industry.
No, I kind of think about it in the same way as like a lot of prominent Nazis were also super fascinated with indigenous culture, and I think it's kind of the same in the same kind of vein where it's you're not actually looking beneath the surface and appreciating the underlying culture. It's like you're looking at the culture as a mystique and a costume.
Yeah. It's to go to sort of what Kyla was mentioning about, like, I guess white folks using the photo of a random non-white person to pretend to be that person. But I think that really just goes back to, I guess, this idea that they must have that, like, for example, in this case, because we're talking about digital blackface, like they think that all Black people think the same. And so like you're going to stick out if you're that one Black presenting person who doesn't agree with their political opinions. Like, are you assuming that they don't have these discussions and disagreements within their own families and their own friend groups and their own communities? That, like, it's just so bizarre to me. And to me, it comes across as their target really would be other white people, because groups, like, people are grouped together. It's like, oh, well, this Black person said it's on Twitter said it's cultural appropriation if I do this, but then this other Black person said it's not. So which one's the easier way? I think that's like, if I really, I guess, sit here and dissect it, that's what it comes down to me. It's like even the whole thing of digital blackface for me, like even the intended audience to me seems like other white folks on the internet.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, I think it also to me seems somewhat similar to people that will pretend to be like Antifa or whatever on the internet to make the cause look ridiculous. Seems like it's a tactic in that same kind of vein, but with other layers added onto it.
Okay, so then to move on to another discussion point that I've brought from Jackson's book, in Chapter 7, The Chef, Jackson discusses cultural appropriation in the food industry, which is summed up beautifully in this quote.
Hello, editing Kyla here. I bungled this quote, so I'm going to go ahead and read it again. At McSweeney's, the novelist Rajiv Balasubramaniam offered a numbered to-do list for appropriation non-believers. 1. Your new friends Bob and Rita come to lunch and you serve them idlis, like your grandmother used to make. 2. They love your South Indian cooking and ask for the recipe. 3. You never hear from Rita and Bob again. 4. You read in the style section of The Guardian about Rita and Bob's new idli bar in Covent Garden, called Idli. 5. You visit Idli. The food tastes nothing like your grandmother's. 6. Your grandmother dies. 7. Rita and Bob's children inherit the Idli chain and open several franchises in America. 8. Your children find work as short-order chefs at Idli. 9. Your children visit you in a nursing home and cook you idlis, which taste nothing like the ones you remember from your youth. 10. You compliment their cooking and ask for the recipe. 11. You die.
And that's the end of the quote. Any initial thoughts on that?
The beginning of it, when you're talking about cultural appropriation and appreciation in food, I just kept thinking about veganism and how veganism has been taken over, and the mastermind behind it was the young millennial who was on, the young white millennial who just got out of college and is finding themselves. That's what veganism looks like to some people. And it's so funny how we've kind of like whitewashed veganism when you can say a majority of South Asian cuisine is vegan, and a lot of dishes in like Central Africa, Western Africa, all of these dishes are vegan that people are cooking. But now it's like, oh, when a person of a different race or ethnicity tries to do it, it's like, okay, this is them emulating a new way of being white, when necessarily it's not. And it's them just living their authentic selves and enjoying their culture. So that's what brought it back to me.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of vegan restaurants I've been to lean heavily on, South Asian, Southeast Asian cuisines, and very rarely are those the owners of the restaurant. Yeah.
The image that keeps popping in my head when reading this is thinking about the different restaurants and the restaurants that are like really popular and frequented that serve quote unquote ethnic food versus the mom and pop restaurants in the neighborhood that are barely getting any visitors. So like we're talking about the vegan industry, look at all the white owned, white run vegan restaurants that are serving all the curry. And then the actual restaurants with the recipes that are delicious and so flavorful and amazing and also vegan or vegetarian are kind of dying because they don't aesthetically look, I don't know, Instagram ready or whatever it is. Like they're not packaged in that specific way. So again, like it comes to like, for me, it comes down to marketability. Like it is all of it. Like the more we're talking about different aspects of cultural appropriation, the more it looks like the ultimate consumerist act to just kind of leech off whatever you can package and sell back to the public and leave the rest behind to kind of fend for itself.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I actually have a little bit more on the food topic, so I'll read that out, and then if anyone has any thoughts that are prompted by this, it's a little bit different. It's from an episode of a podcast I was listening to, The Dave Chang Show. In the episode, MSG, Korean Food and Cultural Appropriation, the hosts discuss this issue, and a really interesting point they make is that so many folks from families who have immigrated are ostracized for the food that they prepare, which especially affects kids attending school. It's hard enough to fit in without some kid next to you making fun of your kimchi. So shame is being tied to a part of culture that should be celebrated, which is obviously delicious food. So imagine the sting when white people start to print these recipes in cookbooks, present them on cooking shows, or open restaurants specializing in the cuisine others have mocked, and then they are celebrated for it. The issue isn't that white folks shouldn't be allowed to cook food from other cultures necessarily, but that the wealth gap that we mentioned earlier in this episode and institutional racism mean that those same opportunities of opening a restaurant or hosting a cooking show or creating a best-selling cookbook aren't available to folks who are probably better at representing their own cultures. Jackson explores the history of this further in Chapter 8, The Entrepreneur, where she paints a picture of modern America built on actively stopping Black communities from accumulating wealth, often violently, but also bureaucratically through things like redlining. If anyone isn't sure what redlining is and you want to learn more, we have pinned a video on our Instagram page, so you can go to @Pullback Podcast to learn about that. But while this book focuses on the Black experiences, There are examples enough of this happening to Asian and indigenous communities as well, and is by no means an American exclusive historical experience of like white people literally stealing the wealth from underneath the feet of other cultures. So, and all of this was happening during the only period of time in our system of capitalism when you could actually grow wealth in your family and community. Now everyone who didn't get rich before the .com boom or isn't born into wealth is hooped. So, thoughts?
The beginning of that really hit home to me, and it's like, and no, I really felt personally connected to that, because with the bringing of ethnic foods for school for a lunch when I was a kid, it was like, I didn't see it as something to be ashamed of. I didn't see it as something that was wrong. But like by my peers and like fellow classmates, it was like, wow. It was like, it was out of the norm, and like, and it was like unacceptable to them. And I was like, why aren't you just bringing a juice box and a Lunchable to school? Well, it's like, no, my parents are immigrants and we can't afford that. It kind of instilled this shame in me, and it's like, oh, okay, like my food's not acceptable. Like, and it was me like lashing out saying, oh, I don't want this anymore. I just want a plain chicken and cheese sandwich. That's it. And it's like, now I'm looking back at it and I'm like, I'm kind of forgetting those days. Like, I've loved to have more ethnic dishes for food. My mom loved cooking and packing them for me, and like kind of like letting those outer forces get into me and stuff is kind of a bummer, but at the same time, it's made me learn, and I'm kind of grateful that happened to me.
The one thing that like stood out to me was when you talked about how like people taking like the Korean dishes and like making cookbooks and like opening restaurants when it's like not their culture and stuff like that. That just reminded me how like recently, like when COVID first started happening, there was a lot of Asian hate and like a lot of Asian crimes and stuff like that. But then now, like especially on TikTok, there's a lot of like things that are trendy that are Asian related, like K-dramas and like the food. And then I know like the Asian community are like, oh, you guys were just hurting us like a couple months ago, like what was the switch up, like you know, like it's kind of like the switch up was just like really fast and like odd to them. So that was like the one thing that like stood up to me.
Saliema, I'm glad you brought up the concept of like how like K-dramas and Asian culture is all of a sudden like the trend. And I think it honestly has a lot to do with K-pop, some of which I personally enjoy.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge K-pop fan.
Listen, BTS has a special place in my heart.
This is really off topic, but I need to know your BTS bias.
Okay. I have like 3 for different reasons.
Okay, that's acceptable.
Okay. So RM is my main bias because, well, basically I just want to, like, I aspire to be a leader like him, especially in my work. JK is my bias wrecker because, first of all, gorgeous. Second of all, the hardest working person ever. Mm-hmm. And then V because his voice is just unhuman. I don't understand how someone can have such gorgeous voice.
That's so funny because those 3 are like my top 3. But V is my number 1. He's like my alt, and then it's Namjoon, which is like RM, and then it's JK.
Yeah,
so we're twins.
I love it. I love this so much. But what it brings to my mind is a discussion I recently had with a very dear friend of mine, specifically because of BTS. There is someone in Europe, a white person. I don't know their name. I don't particularly want to know much about them. I hope they have a happy life doing whatever they're doing. But they are basically a super fan of Jimin, which is one of the members of BTS, incredibly beautiful, incredibly talented, phenomenal dancer, singer. They are a fan to the point where they have done hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of plastic surgery to try to look exactly like him. They're learning Korean and they're basically trying to live life as Jimin. And they now identify as a transracial person because they identify as Korean and not white.
Oh boy.
This is the thing. Like, you will be able to find it all over social media. And I was having the discussion with my friend about how I think that that's inappropriate, and they think that it's just appreciation. And so the conversation basically led to context. And this is what I'm interested in hearing everyone else's thoughts on this. Having lived essentially half of my life in Iran and then half of it here, there's this very interesting thing where I guess if I were back home and I saw like a pop star or a famous person or a celebrity doing something or wearing something that is inherently Persian, like, would I appreciate it and think that's really cool that like my culture and my style is now popular in the US or whatever? But because I live here and, you know, as a community, like, we have faced a lot of racism, Islamophobia, acts of hate, and having to work so hard to assimilate. And, you know, a lot of Iranians can very easily pass as white. But now when it happens within this context, it would be within the context of North America, it would be cultural appropriation because the people whose culture it is aren't allowed to live their culture in peace. You know, my friend that I was having this discussion with, she's from Hong Kong, and she was giving an example about how someone from, I guess, Hong Kong or from East Asia would appreciate North Americans enjoying their music, enjoying their food, enjoying their fashion, etc. But when you bring it over here, where over the last year and a half, people have literally been killed for being Asian, and now all of a sudden, their culture is the coolest thing. You have to have all the Korean cookbooks. You have to start learning how to speak Korean. You have to know all of the BTS members' names, like, because it's the trend and everybody's doing the dance moves, etc. Like, that's the difference between like which part of, like, where do you live? Does it make a difference in whether or not you see it as cultural appropriation?
Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting question. I guess now that we know that most, maybe all of our guests are K-pop fans, how do you make sure that being a K-pop fan is appreciation, not appropriation?
I know Panthea just called my name, and yes, I am a K-pop stan, but BTS isn't my main group that I listen to. I am a Blink.
I knew you were going to say
Biraima, I'm a baby Blink.
Oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
We take you in.
Yeah. I'm brand new.
I think trying to switch your whole identity and like, even I think I know what guy you're talking about. Is his name Ollie London or something?
Quite possibly. I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been known for a while, and like he got like eye surgery to like make his eyes have like the almond, even though like not every Asian person has that type of eye shape. And like I think it's not cultural appreciation. I think he's trying to like it's just weird.
It is very weird.
It's not even like it's like the ultimate appropriation. Like, I don't know, just really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, just talking about something's point, like I try identifying as transracial, it's like at the same point it's like, who are we to say not what he is? But also, like, for me, the way I'm just looking at it is that the main thing about cultural appropriation isn't that I don't want you to enjoy my culture or partake in my culture. It's just that, I don't know, for me, and like I don't know if there are other people out there like this, but just I don't want to inspire or like show in some way or to some extent that you don't have to enjoy the culture you are in or what you identify as. Like, I don't want that, because like just all cultures are beautiful and we should just like all enjoy ourselves. Like, not because I don't want you to just have some African food. Like, no, it's not that. But yeah.
Yeah, like eating other cultures' food and like listening to like different languages of music is normal. Trying to change your whole identity is not.
So yeah, what Saliema said is basically just my point. Like, it just comes to a certain line or an extent where it's kind of unacceptable.
Yeah, for sure.
Biraima, I really liked what you said about it's not about not wanting other people to participate in our culture at all. I really agree with that. I think that's where context really comes in. I mean, with my close friends, like sometimes I'm shoving Persian music in their ears. Like, I'm obsessed with this singer. You have no idea what's going on in this song, but you will listen to it on repeat. Like, and that's with my close friends. Like, I mean, again, not to speak for everyone, but for me and for my relatives, really, like, we are a sharing community. We want to share. We want to like show off our food and our dance and our music and our styles. But again, like, context matters. Are you being respectful? Do you understand what it is that you're doing? Because there are certain things that are, I think, off limits when it comes to participating in other cultures. And so are you aware of whether or not you are stepping over that line? Are you doing it because you think it's a gimmick and it's funny, or are you doing it because you actually enjoy it? And are you also respecting the people from that culture fully while they are participating in their own culture? Like, if you see someone wearing a sari or you're interacting with someone wearing a sari, are you respectful towards them, or are you looking down on them? But when you wear a sari, it's really cool and hip or whatever. For me, I think that's what it really boils down to. It's context, respect, and basically knowing our boundaries and staying within them.
It's like that implied consent as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, that, I think Biraima, earlier in the episode, you were talking about that dollar costumes that were selling, like, indigenous, like, headdresses and stuff. Probably indigenous communities are not making the profit from that. And I think I actually saw that same story that you did, and they were, like, actively protesting it. So it's like, no consent has been given, there's no permission, and it's disrespectful, and it's like obviously disrespectful, but then the company turns around and says, no, we're honoring, this is the intent. And it's like, it's not about intent. It's about how you've made other people feel and whether or not you're being respectful.
Building off of that, it makes me think about how, like, you can have these individual ethics where you're making sure that you're actually appreciating respectfully and that you are coming from a place of, like, wanting to legitimately engage. But I wonder if anybody has any thoughts about, like, when you were reading your food quote, I was thinking about the Bon Appetit issue that happened last summer, where there's information that came out that basically Bon Appetit was really underpaying BIPOC. Or not paying at all BIPOC content creators. And in many cases, they were providing the tools for white presenters who then got paid for the cuisine that these BIPOC creators were making. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on how to sort of engage those kinds of issues as a consumer. I don't know. It seems a lot trickier.
I will say, when you said how to combat these consumerism issues, and like definitely things of like, I think Panthea brought it up too, like with participating in things that are of other cultures and like showing that appreciation, is that, you know, when it comes to like larger corporations, like, you know, the mainstream supermarkets, like instead of getting our worldly goods from there, let's try a local Asian superstore across the street, you know? Let's try a local Pakistani butcher shop, like, you know, let's try those. Because, like, again, those are directly going to the people. And it's really nice to see and support those, you know, like realistically where we can get those worldly goods we crave sometimes. That's just my opinion on it.
Great. I love any advice that is to shop for more food. To that. Shop for more food in more places.
I'm not familiar with the dollar store indigenous costume story, but I don't need to be familiar with this specific story to be familiar with the story. Like the story's been around forever. And just to circle back to the idea of respect, all you have to do is, I mean, every single person really is walking around with a smartphone or a digital device that connects to the internet. Just Google the history or any information about Indigenous headdresses or those costumes that you're going to buy at the dollar store. There is a certain level of respect. There is a certain level of importance that is attached to that garb. Not everybody gets to wear that, and there is reason for that. And why someone would think it's okay to do that, I'm not sure. But when it comes to sort of voting with our dollars, I think that we just have to be willing to do some work, to spend some time. And it is difficult and it is challenging and it can be frustrating. And I think it's important for us to, like, I don't know, show ourselves a lot of grace, but also hold ourselves to account when we can, like to not just be like, oh, well, I don't know, and I'm going to continue to willfully not know so that I don't have to change anything. We don't, at this stage in our lives, with the amount of information out there and how unbelievably easily accessible it is, there is really not much excuse for not knowing that what you did was wrong.
I'm probably just going to add on to what she was saying, but like really stressing enough, like putting yourselves in these like uncomfortable situations and talking about it, because like the problem that kind of makes me the most upset is that when engaging with a person, you know, who hasn't, like, more specifically white people who haven't really like had those hard conversations about race and like privilege and things like that, it's like now I'm starting to feel uncomfortable because you're uncomfortable. And it's like, now I'm gonna probably double back in what I originally wanted to say, because I don't want you to, like, you know, feel some type of way. And at the same time, it's like, why can't they not feel some type of way? Because like they need to, like, to really like understand what I'm trying to grasp at or get at. So like it's an ongoing battle. So that's why, like, really what you were saying, Panthea, like encouraging them to talk to a close group of friends, like do some research on Google and stuff. And like, if you're not sure, come ask me, but, you know, in a polite and respectful way. So yeah.
Yeah. The book, So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo, I found personally very helpful in terms of, you know, how to, as a white person, engage in these conversations and to be comfortable with, you know, being uncomfortable.
I work for a school district, and they have been they've been allowing the staff members to do a lot of like anti-racist training and taking a lot of webinars. Plus, of course, Panthea and I have been working together on this artists conference that we were working on that had a lot of these workshops as well. And I think the number one thing that they all had in common was just explaining about how to apologize when you're wrong, which is not by stating your intention, like the companies selling Indigenous headdresses for Halloween, where they're like, well, we don't intend to be racist. We intend to be respectful. Like, that's not the point. That's not an apology. It's an excuse that pushes the fault back onto the person who's trying to help you. So, like, the number one thing that I've learned recently anyways is, like, to apologize by recognizing the impact, thanking the person for respecting you enough to call you out, and then promising to do better in the future.
Yeah, just like when you were talking, I was just thinking about how this past year, definitely with like the things that happened last year during the pandemic and the USA with George Floyd and things like that, it just like, it made me think of a term called gaslighting, which I recently only came to know of like this past year and stuff from what was going on and things. And it was like just bringing me back to where when people do apologize, like how you were describing, it's a form of gaslighting. It's like saying, oh, I didn't mean to offend you by calling you a racist term, but I am sorry you took offense to that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Like, looking back, like, that's how I've had so many apologies when things have been done wrong to me and things. And, like, before, I would say I wasn't aware of it, so I couldn't, like, act now. But now I'm really, like, really pushing that to get rid of that form of an apology and really like making it genuine in things. Because like gaslighting is not only harmful to you, but it's a really degrading thing that can happen, and like really ending that is something I'm really trying to do.
Yes, the non-apology apology. The I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not sorry for what I did apology.
Yeah. I think the last sort of thought that I want to leave this discussion on is just the one of, again, this came up from like a lot of the workshops that I've been doing recently. And it's about cultural humility, which is the act of hearing and appreciating the truth of people who are different from different cultures or racial backgrounds. It requires making a conscious effort to learn about the values and norms upon which cultural practices you don't understand are based. When something isn't understood, it can be seen as meaningless at best and offensive at worst. And all it takes, as Panthea and Saliema and Biraima have like all pointed out, is like literally a tiny bit of research.
Just Google it once.
Yeah. And I do want to, sorry if I may just briefly interject here. I do want to just say that that's not like, this isn't just something that's for white folks to do. It's for me as well. Just because I'm not white doesn't mean that I know any and all things about any and all races that are not white, and all cultures and all practices. Like I am still actively learning. I'm learning about the Indigenous community near me in Canada, about the history. I'm learning about the Black experience in Canada. I'm learning about the East Asian experience. Like these are all like knowing. Basically, it's okay to not know, but it's not okay to not do anything about it. It's okay to like recognize that I do not know this, but then that's just the starting point. What do I do about it? I go do some research.
I love that. And there's going to be so many resources on our website, but also the Daily Dose of Blackness website is fantastic. And you guys are running a great podcast. So if anyone wants to learn more, they can head there. I also just wanted to say that the Daily Dose of Blackness and the Medusa Theater Society logos are rad. And Kristen and I know a little bit about good logos. Did either of you, yes. Saliema or Biraima, did either of you do the logo for Daily Dose of Blackness?
No. One of the members in our team, she's like a really good artist and she does animated art and she did it herself.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a cup of coffee spilling over and the name of the production just coming out of the liquid, and it's fantastic. I love it. And Panthea's Medusa Theater Company is just a fabulous drawing of Medusa, isn't it?
Yes, I will plug the person who designed that entire thing from scratch is Lisa Diergel, and I am forever grateful that she created that piece of magical art for my company.
Fantastic. So if anyone wants to learn more about the Medusa Theater Society or Daily Dose of Blackness, they're linked literally in the episode that you're listening to. You can just pop down there and click. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to plug?
You guys, thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. This is amazing, and thank you so much for having us. And like I just want to say, it was a pleasure meeting you, Panthea, and like I really want to talk more with you. You seem like an amazing person.
Oh my gosh, you are such a sweetheart. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'm so happy that Kyla brought you and Saliema into this podcast, because now I've met you and Saliema, and I've also followed Daily Dose of Blackness on Instagram, and all the listeners should also do it. Your graphics are awesome. I would love to continue having conversations with you. Kyla has mentioned it a couple of times already, but you, there is like empathy and kindness just oozing out of you. It's amazing. It's really heartwarming.
We only invite amazing people. Actually, we do an end of year quiz. So if anybody wants to be on our end of year quiz show, you are invited.
Oh my God, yeah. Amazing.
And Saliema, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for having us. It was a really nice opportunity.
Yeah, you guys are just fantastic. I love it. If anyone wants to follow them, I'll link to it. And then, of course, you can follow us at Pullback Podcast. But that's it for today. Thank you for listening.